We're here today to do a little practice, and this is a self care connection, but also a lighter practice. Hello there, somatic practitioners, embodied artists. I'm Marissa, and I am a actor, dancer, producer, director, choreographer, all of the things. And I've been on a journey these last several years of deconstructing my relationship with the performing arts, with my role in performing who I am to the public, and my desire to show up into a role to feel like I could bring more of my authentic self into the work that I do in the world. And Self Care for Performers, this project is an integration of a lot of the awarenesses that I've cultivated throughout years or decade of self-discovery and self-inquiry, and also community connections and conversations about what drives us to perform, whether that's to perform as people in the roles in our lives or perform on stage or on camera, and blending the space between those two things. What I found oftentimes is what drives us is our trauma and our patterns and our desire to be seen and met and witnessed, and the lack of connection maybe that we've had in our early childhood or with pivotal core relationships that we've entered into that have fallen apart, and wanting to find a way to move through that or to connect past that or to meet an unmet need that has been left vacated inside of our sense of understanding of who we are. So a lot of what self-care for performers is also about learning how to turn towards instead of away from those parts of ourselves, and from a self-caring perspective, meet the edges of our pain, of our longings, of our desires, and our willingness and wantingness to connect in healthy, mature, wise, and pragmatic ways, in addition to enlivening and adventurous and exciting possibility. So, we're here today to do a little practice, and this is a self care connection, but also a lighter practice. To practice for me is so much about just being present in the moment and being in relationship with the body. So, being in connection with ourselves, our environment, and with others or an other. So, wherever you're at, I invite you to connect to this moment, to a sense of being in space, and take a couple of deep breaths in through your nose, out through your mouth. And if it feels good to you, go ahead and place a hand or two on your body just to be like, hey, I'm here, right? And see if you can feel both the giving of care and the receiving of relationship from you, and cultivate that relational dynamic. And then take a moment and be with your environment. Maybe scan the room, or if you're outside, scan your landscape and notice what feels good for you to notice. So it might be something that feels grounding and orienting, like a brick building or wall, or the floor or the grass. It might be something that feels inspiring, like a light source or a bird or the breeze. And as you're engaging with this environment with sight, also open up your relationship to connection through the felt senses. What is it that you feel? Maybe you feel supported, or you can notice that you're being supported by the earth or by a chair or by a bed or couch. See if you can trust that support just a little bit more. Or if you're in a kind of precarious place, notice that and see if you can support yourself there, and shift your experience of your seated or standing or laying experience to feel more secure, so that you can surrender a little bit more. These are just little micro adjustments you can do anywhere throughout your day. How does that feel for you? Take a moment and just be with that. As we've been with ourselves, and as we're now with our environment, I'm going to invite you to come into connection with other. So that other might be me, it might be somebody in your actual physical proximity, if you're in a shared room or if you're in a public space. It might be someone that you have more object permanence with, so maybe they're not physically with you, but you're aware of them as somebody that is consistent inside of your life. It also might bring up some sense of awareness around spaciousness and maybe a sense of not having somebody in your life for whatever reason that might be. And if there's some withdrawal or longing or experiences that the body wants to bring up or bring forward or allow you to tend to be with, hold, go ahead and allow that to come up, and also see if you can find at the same time a kind and compassionate and caring witness or relational dynamic with yourself and self again as you relate with self and other. So that we don't lose our sense of self-care when we are connecting with another or others. That's one thing I've found is pretty consistent in the performing arts with the artists that I know and I love, and myself included. And there's sometimes a desire to almost let go of self and fall into an experience of a performance or a creative exercise or another person, not also flying on our own wings, if you will, into sort of the next trustful, faithful moment of possibility. That if we're looking to land somewhere that maybe isn't so secure, sometimes we can feel dropped, or we can drop ourselves, or we can experience a echoing of feeling abandoned or discarded in the past, or a present experience of that very thing that brings up past experiences in memory or in felt sensation. And so if any of that's coming up for you or your awareness of somebody else who might be going through that, I'm just going to invite you to place your hands on your heart and breathe there. It'll be a little bilateral stimulation. So that's just one tap and then the other on either side, letting you know, hey, you're here. Hey, your body. Hey, you've got two sides to you. Cross and tap. Just do a couple of those. If that feels good and you want to graduate to something else, you can also take one hand underneath your heart and the other one on top of your shoulder, and just close your eyes and maybe rock a little bit. Maybe self-soothe. And coming into connection with that soft, subtle infant self, your inner infant that just needs a little nurture and love and tender care. And breathing life into that experience, that awareness, that even as we can connect to that sort of need for that infant self to be soothed, we can also graduate our life force energy to awaken a little bit more with some breath. And that can allow a maturation of that subtle infant self into more of the present moment and expression of the evolved you, the whole you, the current you, and bringing that infant online into integration so that they are also welcomed into the full expression of how you meet the world. The needs of that infant are already tended to by you. And the expression of safety, connection, care, and learning through relational safety could be available. A lot of the work I do in my practice with self-care for performers and beyond is about healing that relational dynamic that a lot of us as infants inevitably have. It's a very intense thing to even just be birthed from this very cozy womb-like experience out into the open. And Our first expressivity in the world is crying, and there is a TLC sort of component there, that being with the cry, as opposed to trying to quiet the cry, but being with the cry and acknowledging the big feelings, the big experience. That makes so much sense that this would be so hard. And we can do that for ourselves and for one another at any moment. Yeah. And just letting that experience wash through. And if it feels good to you, I invite you to stand up. I'm going to stay sitting, but if you'd like to stand, go ahead and stand and just elevate your arms up above your head and maybe drop them down. A couple of times, reach big up to the sky and then drop down. You can just drop the arms and stay nice and lengthened through the spine, or you can even drop the whole spine all the way down and just shake it out. And if you're not physically doing it, even just feeling and imagining those sensations wash through your body, that can feel like it's helping to move something through you. Maybe emotionally clogged energy, or some creative life force that's been longing to be lived, or some grief that has been stopped up. See if you can either physically or in your imagination just clear some space. Notice for you is going to be different for each one of you, where you're feeling a little clouded or crowded. So maybe you want to give your lower back a rub, or maybe you want to squeeze your forearms or wrists, or scratch your head, wherever it is that you feel that you have a place that needs a little clearing of stagnant energy or a little TLC. Go ahead and be with that and take a couple of moments for yourself in that practice. And I'm just going to breathe with you while you do that. You're doing such a good job. Very nice. Yes. And I'm just shaking my hands, my palms in like a sort of grounding, rooting yes experience. And sometimes we need to say yes. And also knowing sometimes as we get really good at saying our yes, we feel more confident saying our no. Whoo! And that can be a big one for those of us who are performers, right? Whether that's a people pleaser, and so you're performing your sense of self, or a performing artist where you are often told to leave your baggage at the door, come in, and then be in the moment with the performance, which in some ways is a really beautiful thing to do. And at other times, sometimes we compartmentalize and then we bury, as opposed to compartmentalizing and then coming back into connection to sort through and to be with what we've contained for a moment to connect to something. It's important to also be able to come back and integrate, as opposed to feeling because I have to leave it at the door in order to engage with this, that means it's not welcome in my life, period. And so we're going to just unhook that, that thought, right? And notice if it happens and forgive ourselves instantly and keep moving from there if it does. And doesn't that feel good? Because that allows you to be back in the moment, but also relate with the things that need relationship. And another part of this practice is really about being relationally responsible and response-able. So not from a place of you have all this responsibility and weight on your shoulders, but you have the ability, the accessibility inside of yourself to be able to respond. So we build that capacity, that resilience, not by putting ourselves through more abuse and trauma and challenge and adversity, but when we notice that we're experiencing that, to unhook the patterns that are intergenerationally or culturally systematized, and we just unhook them. We forgive them, and we move forward. And maybe for that forgiveness, in order for that to happen, you might notice grief come up, you might notice rage come up, you might notice things come up. And our practice is to be with those things, right? Be with the edges of those things. Maybe do some wall pushes, which are a great thing. If you have anger, to put your hands against a wall and just push against it and feel that you have the agency to push something away. Yeah. Sometimes pushing down into a pillow, or kneading that pillow and feeling how good it feels and then pushing it away, can also feel really good. Bridge that space between that sensory of needing something and pushing something away. That's something I learned from a somatic practitioner named Lexi Florentina. The needing piece before the pushing. Wonderful somatic practitioner. A lot of great resources on her Instagram. So check her out. And also, let's close off this session and then I'll share a bit about how we can continue to connect. So bring your arms up over your head. Allow the meeting of the palms, bringing the shoulders down, and then bringing those palms all the way clear and down, finding a sense of balance and connection and wisdom and pressure between the two sides of your whole self. It's representation of the coming together of polarities, a representation of not having two binaries that are separate, but by having an integration of coming together into the fullness of who you are, and to be able to be wanting to meet others from the fullness of who they are and be with that. There's a lot of need for that in this world these days. And so our practice is to be the change we want to see in the world, right? You've heard that, I'm sure, 1,000 times from 1,000 different people. I don't know who originated it, but I'm sure someone very wise and from a long time ago. Take a couple deep breaths in through breaths. Take a couple deep breaths in through the nose and then out through the mouth, sharing from your heart a little heart-centered energy, grounding through the spine down into the earth. And again, deep breath in, pulling that energy in and then down, integrating into the enlivening aspect of your life force through your root chakra, up through your lower abs. And one more inhale. Exhale. Thank you for being here with me today. I would love to continue to connect with you here. If you haven't hit subscribe yet, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. If you'd like to be in deeper practice with me or support this channel, you can come on over to the Self-Care Garden. I feel like what's beautiful about practice is that it's ever evolving, constantly shifting. It allows you and invites us to be in relationship with the changes we each have inside of our bodies and we each have inside of our lives and we have between one another in any given moment. There's so much beauty in that. There's so much flexibility. There's so much versatility, and there's so much potential and possibility, which is the birthplace of creativity, which is also so much of what brings life and joy and meaning to the human experience. So from a very heart-centered, relationally ready space. And there are multiple ways to connect to creativity, but this is a healthy, oriented version of what feels good to my body. And I hope to invite others who this feels good to your body to come into more connection. So hop on over to Patreon, join the Self-Care Garden if that's right for you. If you want deeper and more value or investment inside of connection into this kind of practice to be held with more longevity and focus and attention, I also have mentorship and a group facilitation that are available for you to connect to and attune with and look at the application and even fill out those questions for yourself in your journal and see how they feel to fill them out and whether or not it's a right fit to apply at this time. I invite you to take a peek over there and let the questioning and inquiry be a part of how you feel your own sense of worth and value and integrate additional energetic resourcing for what's possible in your life. I'm wishing you well, and I'll see you next time.